Good day. It's Thursday, December the 2nd. I'm Martin Gagel with Market Radius Research. We've got CEO Jeff Kendrick on the call with us today, CEO of Cematrix. Cematrix is a developer, manufacturer, and supplier of advanced cellular concrete products for the infrastructure and construction markets in North America. I've got Cematrix on the call for several reasons. I've known Jeff and Cematrix for many years, and although it's been a while since we've chatted, I was looking for an update. And with the passage of the massive U.S. infrastructure bill, I thought this would be an ideal time to discuss Jeff's business and the opportunities this funding creates in the marketplace. As well, Cematrix has a strong balance sheet along with a backlog of over $90 million. But please remember, this is neither a recommendation nor investment advice. We're here to learn about the company, do your due diligence, and come to your own investment conclusions. Jeff, thank you very much for taking the time to join us. And let's hear your pitch.
Thanks, Martin, and good afternoon to everybody. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today about Cematrix. Of course, Cematrix is the business of cellular concrete, but don't let the concrete name fool you. We don't replace regular concrete, and that's what you have to keep in mind as we go through this. Our business is right across North America, and our business has been growing. Of course, it's been held up a little bit by the current COVID situation the past 2 years, but we believe that in 2022, this COVID situation should be getting behind us, and we'll start getting back to what would be normal, strong growth for the company. Forward-looking statements, everybody knows about that, so I won't speak to that at all. So who we are essentially an on-site manufacturer and installer of cellular concrete, and cellular concrete is one of the fastest growing construction material markets in the world. It's a technology advanced construction material that's generally greener and more environmentally friendly, and is used to provide the infrastructure construction market with better, more cost-effective solutions to significant construction issues. And we'll talk about a few of those as we go through this presentation. There are thousands of applications, but the main applications are ones that are most important to Cematrix and its investors is that we backfill overpasses and bridges, mechanically stabilize earth panels, which are those big concrete panels you see along freeways. We backfill tunnels, and we're the base support for all infrastructure, including highways, particularly when they're constructed over weak and unstable, frost-prone or seismic-prone soils, as an insulator, a floating base, or both. Key investor considerations, of course, we're one of the world's leaders, if not the leader in this technology. And we're also a North American leading on-site supplier of this material. Of course, we've been growing both organically and through strategic acquisition. We use state-of-the-art proprietary technology to produce a material that's lighter, stronger, and more cost-effective, and generally more environmentally friendly than the legacy products that we replace. For many applications, our cellular concrete replaces single-use plastics like EPS block and rigid insulations.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt here, but you made the comment earlier that you do not replace concrete. You're actually a new market for the concrete providers like the Lafarges of the world. So you're actually, they don't view you as taking away market share. They view you as expanding market share, right?
Absolutely, and very good comment, Martin. In fact, every time we sell a cubic meter of our product, it's an incremental market for cement suppliers. And hence the reason that we developed a significant relationship with the largest cement company in the world, that being LafargeHolcim.
Right.
Okay. And of course, in doing that, we're in this significant infrastructure and industrial market. And of course, the US and Canadian governments are expecting to spend billions of dollars in replacement infrastructure. And as we all know, the Biden government has just recently approved $1 trillion of this infrastructure replacement for the US. How that affects Cematrix in the US is very difficult to say right now, but it certainly will improve our opportunities, but we don't count on it. We will see strong organic growth even without that additional replacement infrastructure business.
But Jeff, just to not like part of the whole thing was bridges, roads, and tunnels was part of that, and your part of those are your kind of your key markets. So presumably, if money does flow to that, that should create more opportunities. One would
should provide some significant opportunities for us.
Yeah.
We just can't measure them right now, but we're looking forward to that moving forward finally.
Yeah, and infrastructure projects always take a while for the pipeline to develop. It's not like you just flick a new bridge tomorrow and they start construction. So
no, exactly. But in part, and we've heard this again through our engineering customers that we have, that the Biden government has asked engineering firms and states and to move forward project ready project, right? So, or engineering ready project. So, so it should start earlier than what would be expected if we were starting from day zero, right? So,
yeah.
Okay. Part of that, you know, and we were awarded in the past couple of years two of the largest projects ever let in this space, and one of which is a $30 million tunnel project, which will start not the end of next year. And that sale by itself, $30 million Canadian, is greater than last year's sale. So that's where this market is growing. Every day the number of projects gets greater and the size of the projects gets greater as well. And as you had mentioned, Martin, as of October 6th, our last news release or press release on projects, we have a backlog that exceeds $91 million. And as mentioned a second ago, because of the significant use of cement in our business, on incremental markets for Lafarge, we have developed a strong relationship with Lafarge, the largest cement company in the world. We're on slide 5, so focus on sustainability. ESG has always been prominent in our business for a long time, from an environmental perspective, not only in our cellular concrete products, but in other things we're looking at, and possible acquisition opportunities and strategic alliance opportunities. Social governance is extremely important. We are a family-oriented business and lifestyle that believes in quality of life for all. We always hire the best people for the job, and because we've always been a diversified company, and this includes our board. And then from a governance perspective, we believe in operating ethically, always honest with you. I will always be honest with all of my shareholders and tell them exactly what's happening with our company. We comply with all laws. And we believe that for all of our stakeholders as well, including employees and and all of the suppliers of our business are really partners in our future. So what is cellular concrete? Okay, again, it's not concrete. So essentially, we take ready-mix concrete, we take all the sand and gravel out of it, or all the aggregates, we replace it with a carefully constituted microscopic air bubble system. By doing that, we create a lightweight material that's insulating, highly flowable, and has tremendous benefits. Some of them being self-leveling, highly flowable, energy absorbing, excellent freeze-thaw resistance. So in northern climates, it's a great structural material. Even at our lowest densities, our material is twice the strength of compacted gravel. So when you're looking at replacing bases for road or infrastructure, we're adding strength to that infrastructure. Not significant, but we're adding strength compared to the products that we replace.
Jeff, compared to full-on aggregate concrete, and obviously you do it in different densities, what's the range? You're what, half to a tenth as light as concrete, like regular concrete, or what's the weight or the density differential?
Good question, Mart. And regular concrete is generally around 2,300 kilograms per meter cube. And we're producing material anywhere from 400 to 1,500 kilograms per cubic meter, depending on the application and the requirement, the insulation value that's required. There's many different characteristics that fall into the decision-making process. Generally, we're producing a material that's around 400 to 500 kilograms per cubic meters, because that is a good balance between insulation value and strength. Right. Okay. So how do we make it? We make it on site. The picture on the right is one of our dry mix units. These units, we have 10 of them that can produce up to 250 cubic meters an hour, and they're completely mobile, so we can go anywhere in North America and produce our product, and in fact, anywhere in the world for that matter. And then they produce a material from a dry mix, or a dry cement powder plus other materials delivered by a cement company like Lafarge. And then we have 8 wet batch plants, which are used for smaller applications, typically in municipalities or smaller projects where you can't set up the big equipment, or it's not cost effective to set up the big equipment. And they produce a material from a slurry that's from a pre-designed material mix designed by Cematrix and provided to a ready mix company like Lafarge. Now, what's interesting about our equipment is that after our two acquisitions in the US, we actually have 2.5 million cubic yards of seasonally adjusted production capacity. That could produce 175 million in sales without adding another shift or another piece of equipment. So last year we did 26 million in sales. Without adding another piece of equipment, we can produce 175 million in sales. So we're very well positioned for future growth within the North American market.
Well, Jeff, just to go to that point, like you still have to move your trailers around, like that's 175 million. So that's a bit of a theoretical sort of nameplate capacity. What would be sort of a practical capacity level, or is it?
That is seasonally adjusted. So we would count that as our practical capacity. Okay. We certainly could go higher than that. So you're quite right, Martin. We do have 10 units, but they're spread right across North America. Okay, so they can get to sites very easily. But even so, before we acquired the two US companies, I can remember us pouring a project in New York one day and 3 days later pouring a project in Fort McMurray. So again, we're completely mobile. And that seasonal nature takes into account that movement of equipment back and forth across the country. So how we produce this material is with a number of proprietary technologies, and none of them are patented because most of them relate to formulas. And when you patent formulas, people just copy them. So we protect them through trade secrets and other methods. So this includes advanced material mix designs, advanced foaming agents and additives, advanced processing equipment. We're the only company in North America and probably the world that is equipment specifically designed for that heavy tunnel grouting market, and it's a huge market. Hence, we win almost 90 to 100% of those projects across North America. And that's a large growing market for us. And we're the only company that's really engaged in ongoing R&D to keep us at the forefront of our business and market and industry. So that includes material mix designs, foaming agent, additives, processes, and applications. And this includes, providing, cellular concrete as a floating base material for infrastructure, the cross weakened and stable soils. We're currently in a R&D project with the Department of Highways in Canada. We're looking at sequestering CO2 in cellular concrete to make stronger, more environmentally friendly cellular concrete products. Looking at joint development materials to reduce the cement content of cellular concrete. So cement is high in the use of CO2, and although they're working towards zero-based CO2 supply, we're also working to reduce the CO2 content as well. And then we're looking at the evaluation of other environmentally friendly construction products to market alongside our cellular concrete to make us more environmentally friendly as we develop our business for the future. We talk about generally greener and more environmentally sustainable. And there's two ways to look at this. From an ESG perspective, most people talk about the CO2 content of materials. And that's, in a lot of cases, we are environmentally friendly. And I'll give you an example in that respect. But we also look at it from a replacement of single-use plastic. So we replace EPS blocks and 4x8 sheets of rigid insulation. Nobody wants those to go into landfills. And that's the reason that we're talking about replacing single-use plastics. Most people you hear about replacing, plastic straws and plastic cups and single-use bags and things like that. Well, one EPS block represents 32,500 plastic straws by weight. So you can imagine 1 cubic meter replacing that in a landfill. And because cellular concrete is 80% air, you can break it up to 20% of its size and reuse the material. So again, very environmentally friendly in that respect, though. But we're also energy efficient as an insulator. We also reduce greenhouse gas emissions because to use our product versus legacy products, it takes 10 times or more less time to place our material. So you're saving in vehicle and construction traffic, all of the CO2 that's emitted from vehicle traffic and other construction equipment on site. Then we also enable roads and highways to last longer. You know what Canadian highways are like, or even US highways where, they repave them and generally they're breaking down within a year. Well, largely it's because of the base underneath. And cellular concrete is a much better base material for all highways. Now, we don't expect it to go under all highways, but even those that cross weak and unstable soils is a huge market right across North America. And that's what we're working at replacing right now. And then, as mentioned in the other slide, we're looking at using CO2 in our process to produce a better material and also reduce the amount of CO2 that comes from cement in our material as well. Good example of this is a small project that we completed in the Peel region of Toronto. This is, in fact, only a 600-meter section, a highway that was running between two wetlands. Traditional construction would have required sheet piling down both sides, removing 5 to 10 meters of peat, replacing that with regular gravel, and then paving over top. Using cellular concrete, we only dug down 600 millimeters or 800 millimeters, put in 600 millimeters of cellular concrete as a floating base over that peat moss, and then paved over top. So instead of 2 months of construction, it took less than 2 weeks, at 40% less costs, 25% less emissions, 70% less excavation volume, and 75% less truck traffic. So again, 2 weeks versus 2 months at a lower cost, at lower emissions. Now you can imagine extrapolating this, Martin, over 10 miles of road or 10 kilometers of road. Significant savings from an environmental perspective and from a cost perspective. What do we replace? Again, mention we don't replace regular concrete. We replace things like EPS block. Those are those large styrofoam blocks that you see in the bottom left-hand corner. We replace 4x8 sheets of rigid insulation, not in walls or in roofs, but in under the floors or under highways. We also replace other weak or other lightweight aggregates, weak and unstable soils, expensive steel and concrete pile construction, cement grouts or heavy cement grouts, and tank bases and things like that. And the reason that we do replace them is because we provide a better overall solution, and it's less risky than the other products that we replace. Plus, the companies that have used those prior experience or have had the prior experience with trying to put EPS blocks under roads or behind bridge abutments, it is a pain in the butt. And it takes forever, and it's not fun. So time of construction, significantly less time, risk tolerance, less risk. We provide a better structural or overall structural solution. And usually when you're a better mousetrap or you're a better solution than all of the other legacy products, it usually costs more and lots of times a lot more. In our case, we're generally lower in cost as well. That is really our competitive advantage, or part of our competitive advantage. We save time, money, and generally reduce greenhouse gas emissions while providing a better overall long-term solution to the legacy products that we replace. A couple of quick examples. In a small tunnel project in Edmonton, a traditional grout was to be used and it was going to take 2 months to place at a high material cost. Using cellular concrete, we completed the project in 2 days versus 2 months at a lower material cost. And the reason we're able to do that is the air bubbles in cellular concrete act like frictionless ball bearings. So we can pump high volumes from one location under low pressure. Again, 2 days at a lower material cost versus 2 months. Another project for KBR at the Shell Scotford expansion. In 2 weeks, we saved them 5,000 man hours and 7 weeks of construction. And in that case, we were replacing 4x8 sheets of rigid insulation that were being used to insulate underneath the buildings and infrastructure. Now you can imagine union staff trying to cut styrofoam around pipes and wires and cables and everything. It takes forever, where our material flows like water and we can produce up to 250 cubic meters per hour.
And Jeff, sorry, is it actually being used as in the foam stuff as an insulation to keep heat in or out or whatever? Or is it basically just volume so they use that instead of pouring like direct concrete into it?
No, it's mostly used in that application as an insulator, but actually also a structural base for that concrete. Okay. You can actually reduce the thickness of the concrete on top because of the strength you're adding from using the cellular concrete. But it also then becomes a flowable fill, so you can fill trenches with it. So it really duplicates the effort of other products as well. Why is this such a big opportunity? Well, we're really in $3 billion business verticals. The first being infrastructure, including tunnels, which is roads, runways, MSC panels, backfill, overpass, bridge abutment backfill. And as you mentioned earlier in the conversation, Martin, I mean, this relates to what Biden has moved forward from replacement infrastructure. It's really roads, highways, bridges, and tunnels, right? So it's certainly going to affect our market, but that is our base market, and that's where the big applications are. Second one is industrial and mining. That includes the oil and gas construction area, where we've done a lot of work in the past, but we really barely touched the mining market, which is a huge application for us as well. And then the third area is commercial and seismic. So in building, whether it's roofs or insulation under those buildings, parking structures, shallow utility installation, nuclear infrastructure, and also anywhere they're manufacturing or building infrastructure in seismic prone areas like California. In California, all of the infrastructure like highways and bridges are all being underlaid using cellular concrete. And the reason for that, if designed properly, it will actually float if the soil should liquefy in a major earthquake. And if it does, it would tend to keep that infrastructure in place and save lives as well. So it's a huge market in seismic prone areas like California or even Vancouver.
How would, like in a seismic area, okay, would it be better than having just sort of solid, pure concrete as the base? What attributes about, is it the fact that it's lighter and that it kind of floats then because it's more buoyant on the liquefied stuff, or how does it help in the seismic?
Yeah, so the cement would just sink. Okay, where the cellular concrete is a floating subbase. So if you designed it to carry that concrete on top, meaning that infrastructure, it would float above and carry it. Okay. All right. That makes sense?
I think so, yep.
So these are just a few of the examples. So, you know, there's thousands of applications, but one is as a underlay under runways which cross weak and unstable soils. And this is the Reagan International Airport in Washington, D.C. that is really beside the Potomac River. So it's really going over weak and unstable soils. So you either remove all of those soils and replace them, or you build a floating base over top of it and then build your concrete slab on top of that. And so this is a significant saving in cost and time for the people that own this airport.
Sorry, with the Reagan National Airport, a $1.3 million contract, that seems like kind of small given how much the runways are and everything. Or is this just a small sub-segment of the airport they were redoing, or one new runway, or?
You're quite correct. It's just replacing all of the aprons around a runway. Okay, so it was a very small project within that airport, but enabled them to expand the aprons so that they could utilize that for airplane traffic.
Gotcha.
Okay. Another big application, as mentioned, is as a base material in between or behind MSC panels and bridge abutments. So this is in Winnipeg, Manitoba, and you can see the MSC panels, and that entire area in between is covered with, or is cellular concrete. And it's the optimum backfill material for these materials because they will be held in there forever. Cellular concrete will never break down. If you use earth, the panels will eventually pull out. If you use other materials, they will eventually pull out. But basically, unless the regular concrete starts to break down because of salt and the rebar that's using to hold it together, this bridge abutment should last forever.
And that whole thing, it's like a swimming pool. You build the wall around it and you just fill it up with the cellular concrete, and then it hardens up and you're good to go.
Yeah, so you can see on this picture here that the general contractor will put in one layer or two layers. They're offsetting of MSC panels. We'll come and fill that in, then they'll put in another layer, then we'll come and fill that in, then they put in another layer, and we come and fill that in.
How much could you pour at one time? I guess you couldn't do like 20 feet deep. Like you can only do like a couple feet at a time, or else it'll get compressed or something.
Well, we can pour up to 20 feet deep, which is one of our technologies with one of our foaming agents. So it's extremely stable. But in this case, the limitation is the MSC panels and the tiebacks. you can only go 2 feet deep to tie back until you put in the next level of panels.
Gotcha.
Right? So you're limited by the general contractor and really the MSC panel itself.
Gotcha.
Okay. Industrial, this is the project that I mentioned in NWR where we saved, in 2 weeks, or I shouldn't say, this is a similar project to that one. And so basically this entire facility was underlaid by an insulating subbase of cellular concrete. We poured 50,000 cubic meters here. This was our largest Canadian project to date at $7.5 million.
Right.
And then another big application is tunnels. And this one happens to be in Seattle. You can see where this is a large tunnel. So they use a mole to dig the tunnel underneath the city. And then they put their carrier pipes in. You couldn't backfill this with regular concrete very well, or it would just be impossible, plus the huge cost. And the reason is that you have to be very careful not to float these pipes, right? And so there's a tremendous amount of pressure on the pipes when you're backfilling using any type of material will make it float. So you have to block it well, and you have to really manage the placement of your material in these tunnels. And this is where cellular concrete becomes the product of the future for all of these tunnels. And all infrastructure these days is being built under cities through tunnels like this.
So Jeff, where we see those 3 or 4 big pipes going through, all that space in between the pipes would be filled up with the cellular concrete so that they wouldn't move and that space would be filled?
Exactly. So if you see that wooden bulkhead behind, that's holding back the cellular concrete. So all around there is being filled with cellular concrete.
Gotcha. Okay.
Okay. And these tunnels can sometimes be up to 10 miles long. Another reason for using cellular concrete, because you can pump long distances under low pressure from one location.
Yeah.
Those are just a few of our examples. And of course, in doing these, we're working with many customers, but we're unlike a traditional sales situation where you're selling widgets at a store or something like that, or you're out marketing a widget. We actually educate the engineering world, particularly geotechnical engineers. They are the ones that design materials into projects. Those designs go into tenders. The tenders go into contracts, which go to general contractors, and the general contractors call us for a price. In Canada, we're the only large volume supplier. So generally, they send us the contract as well. In the US, there are a couple of larger providers that can do something similar to what we're doing. They don't have the same technology that we do and aren't capable of producing as light a material or stronger material as we do, but they can produce cellular concrete at greater than 100 cubic yards an hour. So they are competition. Both of them are out of California. One is Cellcrete, the other one is GeoCell. GeoCell and Cellcrete do compete against us across the US, but they don't compete against us in Canada at all yet.
Yeah, in terms of customers, who specs you in to the project? Is it early stage at the engineering level? Is it a decision more of the construction company gets to make? Because if you're using you instead of aggregate or foam boards, you design the whole thing differently. Like, where in the sales process do you have to get in there? You have to get in pretty early, I'm guessing.
We do. It's hard to switch people over, and that's what we're doing in the initial part. That's why it takes so long to develop this kind of market. You have two things that are working against you. You're trying to displace another product that's already been approved. And of course, as we all know, engineers don't like to try anything new because they're risk adverse. So it doesn't matter if your product is better and stronger and costs less. They don't like to try something new until it's proven out beyond any level of comprehension. So we have to get to those engineering firms like Fluors or the S&C Lavalins. But in a lot of cases, those engineering firms are also EPC firms. So they're also the constructor. So, and so for normal or regular projects that come out through provinces or states, they would generally come through the engineering firm and get specified into a contract. The province or the state would release a contract for the replacement of a bridge, and we're part of that bridge. But where the bigger projects are, that actually is a P3 project. So even though it may be designed by an engineering firm to start with and goes out to, 3 large P3 groups that would include engineering firms, a constructor, a financier, it's all a big group of companies. they have the opportunity to redesign the project. And so we're not only just selling to engineering firms, but we're also selling to the end contractor, meaning P3 firms. And then as the market continues to develop and becomes more of a commodity, lots of times we're just getting called directly by the general contractors because it's already specified in. And this is more so in the US, where the market is about 10 years ahead of the Canadian market, where the Canadian market is relatively young still.
Okay, so do you do like lunch and learns and so forth with the engineering companies, sort of explain it to them? And are there any sort of FDAs of the construction world kind of a thing that they say, hey, this is an approved product up to whatever kind of specifications? Or is it just through trial and error and experience that engineers go, yeah, this does work, and we trust that it'll survive the 100-year lifespan of this infrastructure?
Oh, I wish it was that easy. It would have been much easier to grow our business. But you hit the nail on the head right to start with. You have to get out and educate the engineering world. And you start with lunch and learns, okay? And usually in the initial part of your business, your lunch and learns, the senior engineers get the young engineers to go there to get their CPD hours. Those are the early days of Cematrix in Canada. Now a lunch and learn is the senior engineers have a project they're working on, and they call Cematrix or its affiliates to go in and do a lunch and learn presentation to the engineering group that's working on a specific project in how to use cellular concrete for that project. So we've come a long way over time. It doesn't mean that everybody knows about cellular concrete yet, but the lunch and learn process has changed somewhat. Now in Canada, because it's much younger, we are doing that, and we have sales people in every region still doing that. In the US, where it grew and continues to grow quite significantly, the companies that we acquired in the US had no salespeople or outside salespeople. They couldn't keep up with the tenders that were coming out in Construct Connect. And part of the reason for that is what you'd mentioned, is that the national FDA came out with a national specification for cellular concrete in the US. So it basically got approved across North America. It doesn't mean you don't still need state approvals, and in some cases, even city approvals. Like, for example, the city of Los Angeles will have their own approval process, but it did help in advancing the cellular concrete market in the US, and hence they're further ahead than the Canadian market.
Right. You mentioned that your affiliates sometimes do you have like sales agents or brokerage type firms that sell on your behalf, or how does, and maybe you're getting into this later in the presentation, but how does your sales and distribute your sort of marketing work within the infrastructure world?
And no, we don't. When I meant affiliates, I was talking about the two companies we acquired in the US. Okay. Or Canadian affiliates, or US subsidiaries, I guess I should have used the term. And so right now, and we started this last year, we're hiring new salespeople in the US to get out and continue to do that lunch and learn process. Because there's a number of states that barely use cellular concrete yet. And even the ones that are using are not using it to its fullest extent. So although I say the US market is 10 years ahead of the Canadian market, it's still early stage down there. And a good example of that is a project that we announced not this past February, but the February before, is a project in North Carolina that's 16 million Canadian or 12.3 million US. Two of the three P3 bidders that bid on that project did not bid using cellular concrete. So the company that won did use cellular concrete, and is probably partly why they won it. But what that tells us is that there's two P3 groups that still have to be educated on the benefits of cellular concrete. So again, even though the US is further along, we need to start educating that US market still. And hence the reason for hiring salespeople or marketers in the US to get out and do lunch and learns again, because they got away from that in the US. Okay. So one of our customers, and also our largest supplier, is Lafarge. And Lafarge, of course, is one of the largest cement, well, it's the largest cement company or engineered construction product materials in the world. We have developed a joint marketing agreement with them and cement supply agreements, and they have been in place for over 5 years now. We've just extended it for another 5 years. They don't make or break our business. But what they did do for Cematrix, especially when we were a small company in Canada, was add credibility to what we are doing. They believe in what we're doing. And of course, they're our largest supplier. So they provide us with great cement pricing, and cement is 65% of the cost of our material. Not only to provide us with great cement pricing, but great terms. And then they also refer projects to us. And where they actually do projects, they actually include us in their designs. And that will become more prevalent in the US, where they get involved in more P3 projects as part of one of those P3 groups, and internationally. So Lafarge would like to take us internationally with them because they get involved in more large projects internationally than they do in North America.
Right.
And of course, what's important to Cematrix and to our investors as well is they have a commitment to net zero CO2 emissions as well. So once they get to net zero, our product becomes even more environmentally friendly because we're not having to include that, significant CO2 contribution that they're contributing in their manufacture of cement.
And when you do a project, you don't exclusively have to use them as a contract supplier, do you? Or how do you sort of put it out to tender? Hey, we're doing this project, and who's going to give us the best cement prices?
Correct. We're allowed under the agreements with them. They're loose agreements that enable them to sell to other cellular concrete suppliers or providers in the U.S. And it also allows us to sell to other companies that have their own cement supply, or in projects where they can't supply on a cost-effective basis. Okay, Lafarge is not all over North America, not all over the world, and one of the big costs of delivery of cement is, again, the shipment of that cement by truck to site. Yeah. So if there's a cement plant that's 50 miles closer, there's no way that Lafarge is going to be able to compete on price because a lot of it has to do with that trucking. Okay, so in areas, for example, in Ontario, Dufferin Construction, for example, is owned by CRH, and CRH has their own cement supply. Miller Construction is the same way. And it's the same thing in the US. There's other companies that have their own cement supply. So under the agreement with Lafarge, we're able to sell or buy their cement for those projects. So good question. Thank you. Oh, so getting back to our growth strategy. So we have been growing by acquisition. And of course, we raised $23 million this past winter to really grow or look at other potential acquisition opportunities and regional expansion. We're, of course, in Bellingham, Washington, and Chicago, Illinois, through the two acquisitions we completed in the past couple of years, a few years. And those companies do sell into the southern US markets, but we have to drive equipment to do them. And as the market grows, that becomes not so cost effective. So the plan is to regionally expand into those markets. And that also helps with the seasonality of our business too, as well as we develop those markets in more southern markets that are not affected by the northern climates, like we are in Canada and the northern US. Now we haven't, sorry, go ahead. Mark.
Sure. When you you got a project wherever in the US or northern Canada or whatever, you don't just send your truck. You got to send a team up there as well, the guys who know how to operate it. How big is the team? And then you got to put them up in hotels and do whatever, because they're kind of, they're not too many locations that are big enough to like have enough projects to keep your team engaged, or how do you manage that mobile workforce?
Yeah, no, a great question. And how we've looked at expansion, and it's funny, the same thing that the company that we acquired out of Chicago is doing, is they open up an area, they start selling into it. Okay, they don't put a piece of equipment there yet. They just start selling, and they drive from Chicago to start doing those projects as they sell them. Once the market gets large enough, then they put a piece of equipment in that region. Okay, and then they eventually, as the market gets bigger and bigger, they establish an operating group there. So it becomes a full operation. That reduces the cost and the risk of us developing new areas of market. So you're right. So they would ship a crew from Chicago to New York to do a particular project. Wet mix crew or wet mix project would require 3 to 4 people. A dry mix would be up to 6 people. Sometimes we'll in fact even have the contractor to supply the laborers. So we're really just sending the technical people and the operators and the project manager, and they supply the laborers, and we train them on site. And that reduces the cost and the risk to us as well.
Okay.
Okay. So again, growth strategy, it's always going to be the lobbying and educating of that engineering world, which is what you mentioned, Martin. We're going to continue to do those lunch and learns. Of course, successful execution of projects, almost all of our projects come from referrals and doing a great job for an engineering firm or a GC. Just recently, we did a project on a tunnel group in Edmonton, and they sent an email off after the project saying, we've been doing tunnels for 50 years here, and it was the best project we've ever done with a group. So that's the kind of thing that we instill in the marketplace. And, we're looking at quality, great people, developing these relationships so you continue to do these projects over and over again. And because of that, we now have a contract with the city of Edmonton to do their tunnels for the foreseeable future. Right. So, and then, of course, what we're focused on right now is what I just spoke about, regional expansion, particularly into the US, but also into Quebec as well in Canada. And then looking at mergers and acquisitions that are complementary to our company. Also developing strategic alliances, not only increasing the alliance that we have with Lafarge, but with other cement companies and other companies as well. And as mentioned to expansion eventually into international markets. We won't do that in the next couple of years, but certainly after that, we'll look at potential licensing and franchise opportunities or getting involved in those large P3 projects around the world. Okay. Now, from an acquisitions perspective, those targets, we're really looking at a number of different types of companies. One, other cellular concrete companies, not many competitors out there, but we will look at them. We're looking at companies with complementary products, particularly in regions where we're not, because they can help supplement our regional expansion as well and provide us with other product opportunities for our other businesses, say in Canada or in the northern US. We're also looking at companies with other environmentally friendly construction products that we can sell through our current sales process and also make us more environmentally friendly as a group. Also looking at strong, well-established businesses, so not necessarily businesses that are new products, but well-established businesses in areas that already have sales and EBITDA and a strong base support for moving forward. And we're providing our product to expand their businesses. And so that's kind of what we're looking for. And we've looked a little bit vertical integration opportunities as well.
With the other cellular buying a competitor, that would essentially be, maybe they have a bit of unique technology that you could use, but essentially you'd be buying their customer base, their relationships, their distribution, and so forth. Is that would be the main advantage of acquiring a competitor?
Exactly. They don't really, or if they have a technology that we don't, that we wish to acquire. But really what's important in our business is the people. What makes Cematrix successful and even Mix and Site and Pacific International Grout are its people. And so having strong people is very important. So one of the things that you don't see here though, and then one of the barriers to entry and why we acquired Mix and Site and Pacific International Grout is that it could take a new business up to 10 years to get a state approval for your product, even though it's the same product as somebody else may be selling. So by buying Pacific International Grout and Mix and Site out of Chicago, they already had those state approvals right across the US. Well, the other companies may have approvals that can benefit Cematrix group of companies for the future, or it's a great opportunity for other reasons, or they may not be the right company to buy. We're not just going to buy the company for sales. We can go into a region and grow our sales. We don't need to acquire a company that just has sales.
All right.
Okay. Just financials quickly. We're doing projects, as mentioned, anywhere from $5,000 to $30 million. There's two different project types, as mentioned, the regular state, provincial, municipal projects that come out every year. They're usually completed within that year. Then there's the large P3 projects that could take years to design and then a couple or 2 or 3 years to actually be constructed, right? They're large, infrastructure projects or tunnel projects. Typical sales cycle is 1 to 6 months for the smaller ones, 3 months the larger for the bigger ones. Length of projects for permanent projects is a half a day. Even the bigger projects are not more than a year usually for us. Sometimes they'll stretch into 2 years. We're paid by the cubic meter, so we're invoicing on a daily basis or on a monthly basis. Payment cycle, we're generally being paid for the project before we have to pay for the cement. And margin profile, once we get over that sort of break-even sales level or up over 30 million, we're averaging 30% margins. And the margin continues to grow because we don't need to add additional operation staff to generate more business. Our equipment is highly underutilized right now, and our operating staff is highly underutilized. So without doing anything, we can grow our sales and grow our margins. And we certainly don't have to add more in the way of administration and salespeople. We're overstaffed in that area, but you need that in order to maintain the business currently. So anyways, we're well positioned for the future and continue to grow this business and to become quite profitable in the very near future.
Yeah, sorry, going to the underutilization, you've got 10 systems running around the North America. Am I right on that?
10 of the larger machines, yes.
And I'm guessing those are kind of regionally based, so that way, because if you were too small, like if you sound like you could maybe be running on 5 or 6 or even less than that, but then you'd be driving them all over the place. It's sort of setting it up for growth and just for geographic utilization.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So the way we scale up our business is these dry mix units are actually located across the country. Even though we're only in Chicago and Bellingham, we have customers that are in Texas and St. Louis. So we'll keep a dry mix unit at those locations. Or for a wet mix unit, for example, we have a wet mix unit started in a yard in New York, and eventually we'll have one in Texas as well. And in Canada, with Lafarge, which is now expanded into the US as well, they have offered it for us to use their locations to store any equipment for us. So we're really in a good position to really grow that market. So from a utilization perspective, Martin, we're only our equipment is like 20, our big equipment is 20 to 25% utilized. Right. So tremendous amount of growth in that opportunity as well. Capital structure, basic shares outstanding around 134 million, fully diluted 176 million, hit a 52-week high of 86, a low over 33. Market capitalization the last time, again, at the last time was November 30th, was around $50 million. What we've done this year, I mean, a lot of good things have happened this year, although sales have been slow because of COVID. We've, of course, raised $23 million. We only have $9 million of debt on our balance sheet right now, of strong working capital of over $20 million. We have 22.5 million cash equivalents. So we're really positioned not only for acquisition, but for growth. In the long-term liabilities, there's only really 4 million of traditional debt in there. There's 3 million of convertible debt that we believe will convert over the next couple of years as the share price goes back up. And that convertible debt, or that traditional debt, is with the BDC, a Business Development Bank of Canada, is a very friendly and at 6% interest rate. So again, very strong balance sheet and very well positioned for future growth. Excellent management team. We added Randy Boomhauer as the CFO last December, who brings a lot of entrepreneurial experience to the company as well. Pat Stevens is the former owner of Pacific International Grout. He's, agreed to stay with us forever. He continues to manage the Pacific International Grout business for us, although we have somebody in the succession process to learn from him right now. Jordan Weiner is the son of the former owner of Mix on Site, and he had actually ran the business for 5 years for his dad before we bought it, so he continues to be with us. And he is actually, both Jordan and Pat are shareholders of Cematrix. In fact, Jordan is actually one of our larger shareholders now, based on the acquisition of Mix on Site. Board of directors, strong group of people. We've just added Anna Cugliata and John Kim. Anna's strong human resource side. John Kim has tremendous background in the investment banking market, and so he just adds a great wealth of technology and positive public company experience, and also has a strong knowledge in the acquisition area as well. So just a quick investment summary. Of course, we're inside the concrete. It's one of the fastest growing construction materials market in the world today. So not just in North America, but around the world, they're looking at exponential growth of this market. We're the world leader in this technology, as far as we know, and a North American leader in the on-site manufacture and placement of this material. We're using state-of-the-art proprietary technologies. equipment, foaming agents, and other technologies that are generally cleaner for the environment. We're looking at significant growth opportunities in this lucrative infrastructure market, which is even going to grow further with the commitments of governments to spend money during this recession, particularly the $1 trillion in infrastructure that Biden is moving forward in the US and is now approved, so it's heading to market. We have a strong bid pipeline in excess of $420 million. Those are projects that we've been approached on by an engineering firm or a general contractor for a quote, a design or both, right? So they're real projects. Not all of them will go cellular concrete, and not all of them will go ahead. But that bid pipeline used to be less than $50 million when it just was Cematrix not too long ago. And then our backlog, because of delays in projects and the growth of the market organically, is now up over $90 million. And what's important to note there is that even though they're not going into the ground, actually our backlog has grown by 30% since year end. And that is really organic growth. Okay. And we see that continuing for the foreseeable future. So still early stage market, particularly in Canada, and still early stage market in the US as well. And of course, I'll just mention again, strategic alliance with the largest cement company in the world, that being Lafarge. And that only makes us a better company right across North America.
With your $91 million backlog, what is the, like, projects always get delayed and whatever, but theoretically, what's the duration of that? If you just didn't get any new business, how many years would that be spread out over on a preliminary basis? Well,
it's funny. I'm going to go back to this slide. I hope everybody can see this, but you can see prior to COVID, the backlog actually was close to what the sales were for the year. And of course, we expected that to continue before COVID hit. So you can see that the sales certainly hasn't caught up with the backlog. But eventually, we expect the backlog to go into the ground within 1 to 2 years. Okay, so it's not a long-term thing. It generally will go into the ground. The tunnel projects are usually a little bit longer. So if it's a really big project, it could be 3 years. But generally, we're pouring that tunnel in 1 year. It takes them 1 year to dig the tunnel, another year to put in the pipe, and then we grout, right? So that's the process in the tunnel side. Where in all the other infrastructure, we're generally upfront. So we're providing the underlayer base for the bridge or for the overpass or for the roadway. So it's very early in the project process.
Makes sense. Okay.
All right. So that's that sort of gives you a good idea. And of course, at the end of the year, we were at 81.5 million in backlog. We're actually at over 90 million. And of course, that 90 million is less the sales that we've generated or put in the ground this year. So.
Okay.
So that's Cematrix in a nutshell. And my objective today was to give everyone a good overview of what our business is and really to give an update for those who are already investors. The stock market has been affected, and of course our share price is not trading where we would expect it to be, but we believe that to be very short term. And partly, just to give you an overview, Martin, is that a lot of the projects that have been delayed, they're already going into the ground. So they're ready for our material next year. And that's why I believe a lot of this backlog that's been delayed is now going to start going into the ground. And it's very evident in what we see in both the project contracting and basis as we're moving forward in our market. The other thing that's really interesting to note is that in Canada, one of the reasons we lost money last year is our business in Canada actually went back 50% in sales. This year, it's almost rebounded completely. So people are getting used to working within this COVID environment. And that's what we expect for the future. Even though it will be slower, we're all adjusted to the COVID situation, and projects are going to start going to the ground and they're going to get done. And we see that happening already. And what's interesting about the Canadian market is not only is it rebounded almost 100%, but our bids in Canada are up over 50% to date over pre-COVID levels. So pre-COVID levels, we were averaging 200 and some bids per year. We're up over 300 this year. So, and that's prior pre-COVID level. And we would believe that that's completely organic growth. That's not being reflected in our sales yet, but will start to be reflected in 2022.
What do you have a rough win ratio or win rate that you have on, if you bid on 100 projects, you'll get 50% of them or whatever? Is there a number you can throw
well, in
related
Canada,
to that?
we did keep track of that. So we were getting up to over 40% success rate of projects, new projects in the year and projects carried forward. So that's how we measured it. If projects carried forward to a new year plus the new ones coming in, we had a 40% success rate. And even the new project ones, we were around a 30% success rate. So, and so that grew from zero, of course, and that's quite good. I mean, to win 30 to 40% of the bids that come across your decks, that's very good in this marketplace. US, it hasn't been tracked, so we're currently developing that information. Of course, there's more competitors in the US, so it would generally always be lower as an acceptance rate because you're losing projects to others. But still, it's been quite strong in the US as well.
When you're bidding on a project, you mentioned those that one P3 project where only one of the bidding parties was using the cellular concrete. If there's like 3 different groups bidding to build a bridge, you could theoretically be in all 3 of their bids, or after they win the bid, you could still sort of sneak in on that, and like how?
Yeah. Yes. So yes, we tried to provide pricing to those other 2 groups, but they decided that they were going to go with what they were comfortable with, which was using EPS block. Okay. Yeah. And so, and lots of times, even if we lose the project to someone else and they haven't gone with our product, we will approach them afterwards. Okay, so that's and a number of times we'll be able to convince them to use our products, and that continues to grow. So early days it probably was very difficult to convert them, but nowadays it's becoming easier and easier.
And is it typical when you do pitch a new, let's say an engineering firm that didn't use you pitch them on the cellular concrete, do they now typically know what cellular concrete is, or is it really kind of starting? How often do you have to sort of start from the beginning of this is cellular concrete and sort of walk them from the beginning, or are they mostly at least partially down the learning curve?
No, in lots of cases, Martin, I'm going to go back 2 years in Canada to I'll give you 2 examples. One, we did a presentation in engineering from Stantec, which is a company we work for across the Western US in Quebec. And there's 40 engineers there, and not one of them had ever heard about cellular concrete before, even though we'd done projects in Quebec. When we did the NWR project a few years back, Fluor was the general contractor and the engineer of record for that project. They invited us down to Texas to present to their global engineering group of over 500 engineers because they'd never heard of cellular concrete before. And the US market was 10 years ahead of ours, right? So lots of times we're finding that there are lots of people who have never heard the word before. It's still not taught in schools. It's an underground market, but we have increased the knowledge significantly since our beginning and since the beginning of the companies that we acquired as well too. It is growing. It's just, there's a long way to go yet.
So it's frustrating that it's sort of not more developed, but at the other, on flip that coin is that there's a huge opportunity. Once you educate people, the market potential gets way bigger. Yes,
no, exactly. So one other thing to mention, and you talked about approaching other contracts. So once we won this project, generally in the US, you have to use a traditional specification. So even though we can produce materials lighter and stronger than our competitors, we can't use that initially when we provide a price. We can tell them that we can do that, but they have to include the traditional specification in that their bid to the general or bid to the owner. But after the project is awarded, we can then go to that contractor and say, hey, listen, we can provide you with a lighter density material at a lower cost. You make more money, we make better margins, and we save the customer money as well. Plus, we're providing them with a better solution to their project. So that's what we do.
Considering that the competitive products, the foam and everything is so much more expensive in both just the implementation of it and the product itself. Are you underpricing your product? Could you be charging more for it given it's such sort of relative high value?
We do in some circumstances, and others we're competing against another product. There are situations where the ground is so weak in areas you can't replace it with cellular concrete because our material is heavier than EPS block. Okay, so those are areas where we can't compete. They will have to still use EPS block as the solution.
Okay.
So that's another thing to consider. We're not the solution to every situation, but in a lot of situations we are a better solution and a more cost-effective solution. So in that case, we aren't the cheaper solution, right? We're not even the right solution for the application. But in cases where we do provide a solution that's much more cost-effective, we try to price it as close to the alternative as possible.
The same price, but a better solution.
Exactly, and a higher margin to us.
Okay.
That's why you see in the smaller to mid-sized projects, we can get significantly higher margins than 30%.
And your margin, your gross margins average 30%-ish?
Yes, when we get up to that past $30 million level.
Yeah. Okay. All right. We've got some, we're over an hour here. We've got some questions here. So let's, I don't know. Someone's asking about the share price. You kind of mentioned it for the small caps. It's been a tough market for a lot of things. Anything else you want to add on the share price side?
Well, a couple of things good in mind. We're getting out and sharing the story. And, we're finding that a lot of our institutional or current institutional investors are actually picking up stronger positions while people are selling them. I mean, I don't have a lot of cash available. I'm going to pick up some more shares, and I know our CFO picked up some more the other day. I mean, it's a bargain price right now. So we know, and the people that we're sharing the story with know that this backlog is going to go into the ground and it's going to continue to grow. And we're looking at acquisition opportunities that are going to add value to Cematrix and its shareholders as well. So it's really short-term pain for long-term gain. I mean, I would tell you the truth if I thought there was going to be more pain next year. There will be some delays, but we're going to get back into what we expected pre-COVID level sales, and not completely back to normal, but generally better than what we've been doing the past 2 years. And that's already proven out. So
the COVID impact on infrastructure and construction, has it basically just slowed construction projects down where there are a few more protocols and things just take a little bit longer, and maybe there's some supply chain issues related to other things that kind of slow it down? Is that kind of the extent of where the industry is at with COVID? Absolutely. Projects never stopped. Yeah. They just, initially they took months longer to get one day done, right? So, so now it's getting more comparable to, it took us one day the last time, maybe it's taking 1.2 days now, right? Okay. Because of the protocols, because everybody's learned to work within this process. Yep. All right. Someone's asking about the profit margins on a typical project. Like you said, around 30%-ish once you get to over 30 million of revenues-ish. Is that? It will average out, right? So that, okay. And we've seen that in the past. So each of the companies, including Cematrix, we go back to Cematrix in 2000 itself, in 2015, we did 50 million in sales. Most of that was industrial construction in the oil and gas sector. We had over 30% margins and over 20% EBITDA on sales. Same thing with Mix on Site and Pacific International Grout. They both had achieved, greater than 30% margins on average and greater than 20% EBITDA on sales. In fact, one year, Pacific International Grout itself did 14 million US in sales and 5 million US in EBITDA. So, I mean, that we expect that to happen as this continues to grow. But as the projects get higher and higher, so we get up to the $40 to $50 million range, and there's more larger projects in there, the margin percentage will come down a bit on average, but the general EBITDA percentage on sales will still continue to be greater than 20%. The Eglinton Crosstown subway project in Toronto was a massive underground civil project. Why did you not get any work on that project?
We have done work on that project, are doing work in that project, and expect to continue to do work in that project. And because it's subway related, I'll mention another city in Canada that's doing a project that one of the supply chain issues out there is actually a competitive product. So people are having a hard time getting EPS block. And that's provided Cematrix with an opportunity. So companies that have previously specified EPS block because that's what they were used to are now calling us to replace the EPS block that they can't replace. And so that not only includes potentially the Anglican subway, but also other projects like in Ottawa, Hamilton, Kingston, and other places as well.
Right. How do you explain the growth rate of backlog is greater than revenue growth? I think we kind of addressed that already. Or is there something you'd like to add?
That's really, again, the delay in projects, right? So a lot of the bigger projects that should have gone in the ground, for example, a large project in the US, there was $6 million that was supposed to go in the ground this year. So almost 50% of that project, it still hasn't gone in the ground. Now they are scheduled to begin in the spring, but it's out of our control, right? So that again stays in backlog. It would not normally stay in backlog, but that entire delay is related to COVID.
Yeah,
and they've told us it is, right? So
yeah. And again, the last contract announcements we've seen were, I think, in June and October. How are new sales shaping up on the sales, not backlog front?
You'll be seeing new announcements come out on a regular basis over the foreseeable future, right? So we try to let it go up to around 3 to 5 million in sales before we announce new contracts, but we're always working on projects that are in the neighborhood of 1 million to 10 million in sales. Okay. But they take a while again to finalize and get to the contracted stage.
I like this question. Will you be affected by the Buy America aspect to the infrastructure package?
Good question. Because of our 2 U.S. subsidiaries, the answer to that will be no.
Good stuff. Could you talk about the project with the University of Waterloo and Lafarge, and how is that going?
It's going well. The initial testing, I think we talked about before. So this is a project with the University of Waterloo, the Department of Highways in Canada, and others, and that's to develop, a national specification really for the use of cellular concrete under all roads or infrastructure that crosses weak and unstable soil. So the initial testing, which is lab testing and things, has all been done. And now there's projects in the ground that are being monitored for a few years. So there'll be reports coming out every year, and that knowledge is already being used by some engineering firms for road and bridge projects. But the full process won't be done for another year or two. We, in fact, just poured another section of road for the University of Waterloo in the Waterloo region this past summer. So they will monitor that for 3 years. But it is already starting to benefit us, but it won't really significantly benefit us till it's all done and that specification comes out. Now, sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Well, I was just going to mention the Lafarge relations. They are also participating in that by providing us with product at no cost. So they're right behind what we're doing, and of course with Lafarge relationship, we're working with them on projects all the time, and they're referring projects all the time. So that relationship continues to develop, and right now we're growing the U.S. side of that relationship.
Gotcha. And I think kind of one final question here, a good question. Could you talk about the seasonality of the business in winter versus summer months? And I'm guessing there's different seasonality. The more you expand further south in the US, the less seasonality there is compared to Canada.
Exactly. So number one, we are seasonal. Almost all of our business is seasonal, except for tunnels. You can put a tunnel in Toronto in the middle of winter because you're pouring the product underground. As long as we heat and hoard our equipment up above, we can pour it anytime. But it all, again, it boils down to when the tunnel is scheduled. So we grow our tunnel business. That's going to help with seasonality. The other thing is going to help with seasonality is expansion into the southern U.S., which is what you mentioned, Martin. And we're working on that right now, and we're already selling down there. But in reality, first quarter is basically off season. if you look at sales for the past 5-6 years, or even sales with the two companies we acquired, first quarter and second quarter even are usually our slowest times.
Right. I think that's everything, Jeff, and we're well over an hour and 15 minutes here. So this has been very in-depth and lots of great questions from the audience, which I thank them for very much. So any final comments here, Jeff, before we wrap it up?
Just that if they want to get a hold of me, they can go to our website, and of course my contact numbers and the contact numbers of our IR firms are there, the Howard Group in Bristol as well. Always available for questions, and I certainly am in the virtual investor circuit, so I'm out sharing the good news of Cematrix on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. We don't do them all, but we pick the ones that we believe will be good for Cematrix and its investors. And then, as mentioned earlier, patience is probably needed right now because of the infrastructure delays, but 2022 and beyond look like they're going to be very great years for Cematrix, regardless of whether we complete an acquisition or not, and regardless of whether Biden's infrastructure bill actually moves forward. We have a lot of things happening, and there are a lot of good things happening, and you will see continued strong organic growth in our business.
Right. With that, Jeff, we thank you very much for your time, and have a great day. And maybe we'll get you back in 6 months or so, and you can give us an update on how things are progressing.
Thanks, Martin, and I will look forward to it.
Cheers. Talk to you soon.
Thank you, everyone.